Hello everyone, I'm Charlie and this is episode 3 of my movie reviews. Today we're going to be talking about the Phantasm series, directed by Don Coscarelli. I hope I'm saying that correctly, but he wrote and directed all 4 of the series. We're going to start with part 1 here. This is, let's get this on the screen, this is Phantasm 1. And this is an interesting series. I like the series, even though logically there are reasons I shouldn't. I'm going to get into that in a moment here. But the film is I think the cast is good. It's a cast of unknowns for the most part. Reggie Bannister is the main character. Angus Scrimm is the villain in the movie. And probably people that nobody's really heard of, B actors or people that really didn't do much beyond this. A lot of the people involved are musicians as well. Let's get started though with part 1. The film was made in 1979. It's a horror sci-fi film. Um, it almost has how do I say it? Sort of a dreamlike quality, and you'll know what I mean if you watch the movie. The music, it's very sort of surreal. So I give them props for the soundtrack. Um, the plot's a little weird. It's about this guy who's a mortician who takes dead bodies, shrinks them down, and enslaves them. And the villain of the movie, spoiler alert, may or may not be an alien himself. So um, now the film, as I said, positives about the film are the music and the casting. I thought was good, really well done. Um, the negatives about the film, it's a little bit too gory. I thought that was unnecessary, some of the violence. But compared to today's movies, it's probably mild. And I was actually talking to some friends about this recently. I think horror should go more PG-13, in my opinion. Some of the movies that have succeeded that are less violent that come to mind. The original Halloween was not particularly gory. I thought they did a great job. I think that was rated R, but probably the equivalent of PG-13. That's for a different review. But basically, this film. Now, one thing about the movie and the whole series in general is the 1971 Hemi Cuda, one of the most powerful sports cars. I don't really know much about cars, but I know enough about this series that they always use that car in this movie, or a number of those cars, because they're always doing stunts with the Hemi Cuda of all vehicles, which is kind of surprising. You'd think they'd do stunts with a cheaper car, but and that's part 1. Part 1. I think you need to see the movie. It's a hard film to describe. I described it for a little while. But I think that the movie, it came out in a time frame when horror movies were popular. It was right after Halloween. Um, but of the 4, I kind of like part 1 or 2 the most. 2 actually had the. Let's jump right into part 2. I think we've talked about 1. Part 2, um, the same basic cast. The only real difference is that James Lee Groves takes over for the character of Michael. He's in part 2 as Michael. He's a good actor. You might recognize him from Drugstore Cowboy. He was in Point Break. He he doesn't. He's not really a main. He doesn't usually get the main roles. He's usually kind of a secondary character, or he's been in a lot of B movies over the years. But good actor. I thought he did well in this. But Phantasm 2, it picks up where the last one left off, and the character of Michael is in a I guess it's kind of like a juvenile hall slash mental institution, and they presume, of course, that he's paranoid schizophrenic because of the events of part one. And again, I'm giving brief reviews because I don't want to give the whole plot away. You kind of need to see them. But in this film, Reggie Bannister and Michael go after the tall man, so it's a little bit different in that sense. They pursue him. They drive long distances to pursue him. And in all four movies, Angus Scrimm is plays the villain. And in real life, he was a film critic and also, I believe, a music critic. I remember watching Monster Vision years ago with Joe Bob Briggs, and he discussed that. And one other thing I wanted to mention about the director, Don Coscarelli, he did the film. What's it called? He did the movie Bubba Hotep with Bruce Campbell, which I thought was, in a way, a better movie than all of the Phantasm movies. Certainly, production value-wise, if you put more money into it. Um, but that was. I'm just checking my time. I don't want to go over the time. But that was a good film as well, and by the same director. So Phantasm 2, good movie. I think that part 1 and 2 are better than 3 and 4. And most of these films are shot locally in Los Angeles, places like Alhambra, the San Fernando Valley. I think even parts of it were shot in Oakland. I did some checking on that, but primarily it's a Los Angeles shot movie. Even though for a lot of the scenes in the movie, it's supposed to be Oregon, at least for part 2. It's mostly shot in Los Angeles. Um, let's jump into part 3, shall we? Here's part 3. What am I doing? Here we go. Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. And again, we have Angus Scrimm here. Now, this film wasn't quite as good as part 2. It didn't have the production value. And I remember, I actually read on the internet that the producers were unhappy with part 2 because they put more money in part 2. So they told the director, they said, hey, you can make this movie, we'll distribute it, but we won't produce it. You're going to have to find funding independently. Hence, the film was a little bit less budgeted. It was a little bit cheaper. And then it did not have James LeGros. It actually, in this film, Michael Baldwin reprises his original role from part 1, and he does it for 3 and 4. So it's really, it was made on the cheap. I mean, it was interesting though, but I think that it was, the pacing was worse in part 2, but I think that it was, if you like the series, you'll like this one. You kind of have to like the series to keep up with these. And the continuity is rather poor, I must say. From each film, they take a lot of liberties with continuity. They have a lot of the false endings that were popular kind of in the 70s and 80s, meaning, you think everything's done at the end, and then it's a dream sequence, and I think you get the general idea there. I think I'm actually running out of time for this one. We stopped at part 3. I'll be back momentarily to wrap up with Phantasm 4. Thank you, and I will see you shortly.